All right, so today we're diving into something, well, pretty relevant, I'd say, censorship in the UK. You've sent us this Wikipedia article, listeners, and we're going to unpack it. What gets me about this whole thing is how it's not as simple as you'd think, right?
Yeah, you're spot on there. I mean, you might think there's just this one big rule book, about free speech in the UK, but looking at this article, it's obvious that's not how it works at all.
It's more like what? A patchwork. A bunch of things over time.
Exactly. To really get it, we need to start with how free speech is even seen in the UK, the basic idea. Now, the article mentions this Press Freedom Index UK's 35th.
35th. Out of how many do you know?
Well, it's a global ranking, so a decent amount. But the point is, it measures how much freedom journalists and media have. Higher is better.
Okay, so 35th, not great, not terrible. What does that tell us, practically?
It shows that the UK, sure, they value a free press, but it's not like top of the class globally.
Room for improvement, then.
You could say that. And this ranking, it shows the UK always trying to balance things. Free press is good, but then there's national security, people's reputations. It gets messy.
Right, it's not as easy as say anything, anytime.
Hmm.
This is where diving into the history gets so interesting. Seeing how they've handled this in the past, like wartime censorship, that's got to be wild.
Oh, yeah. The Ministry of Information, way back in the World Wars, they were censoring stuff deemed, get this, unpatriotic.
No way. Imagine that now. Newspapers told what they can't print.
Exactly. And it's funny because those echoes are still here. This Official Secrets Act, it's still around. Basically leaking government info, especially national security stuff, big no-no.
So even now, it's like balancing what the public should know versus keeping some things under wraps.
Exactly. And people are always arguing about it, or more transparency versus keeping things safe. It's not just about keeping secrets, though, right? Art censorship, that's a whole other thing.
Oh, yeah, and this is where it gets a little crazy. The article mentions this, like the Lord Chamberlain could censor plays. Anything political, anything vulgar. Could you imagine that now?
Right. It's wild how what's considered decent changes. And it wasn't just plays, films, too. The Mullif-Kintyre test. Ever heard of it?
No, sounds Scottish.
So this was how the film board supposedly decided if something was too racy, right? They'd compare certain body parts on screen to the angle of this peninsula on a map.
You're kidding.
Nope. Too prominent. The film got cut. Shows how random these rules can be.
Wow. And we think music censorship is wild today. But back then, the BBC had a whole banned songs list.
Oh, yeah. From too political to just plain racy for them. It really makes you think, who gets to decide these things? And it changes so much. Like, remember when Margaret Thatcher died? Ding dong, the witch is dead, that song?
Oh, yeah. It was like a whole thing.
Well, that song was huge, but the BBC wouldn't play the whole thing too political too soon.
Wild. A kid's song causing that much fuss.
Yeah.
It really shows how even something silly can be huge EE, culturally, politically, all of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, nowadays it's not about what plays are okay, it's the internet, right? That's a whole other beast.
Totally. This article, it talks about how online censorship's way harder, but the UK's trying, blocking the really bad stuff like child abuse content. That's one thing. But then you've got online hate speech, and that's a whole debate, isn't it?
It's like they're trying to catch up all the time.
Yeah.
The internet moves so fast.
Exactly. And it's not even just, is this illegal, right? It's those gray areas. You see those think before you post campaigns, age checks for certain sites, people getting in trouble for mean tweets. Where's the line?
And that's what I find interesting here, those real-life examples the article gives. It's like Black Mirror stuff. This Twitter joke trial where the guy makes a joke about an airport and suddenly it's super serious.
Right. And then you've got the guy fined for a football chant. Was it offensive? Sure. But actually harmful. It makes you think about the context.
And then that whole baker thing, refusing to make a cake because of, like, a gay marriage message. That's laws clashing big time.
Exactly. It all boils down to whose rights are more important. And that changes depending on who you ask.
It's crazy how, like, this isn't just theoretical anymore. It's actually happening. And it affects everyone from, like, big-time writers to just someone posting online.
Exactly. And that's why it matters. We're all part of this. It's about saying what you want, but also making sure people are safe, right? And finding that balance is tough.
It's weird, right? We started with Shakespeare, and now we're talking about Twitter jokes and cakes. Censorship's everywhere, isn't it?
It really is. And the thing is, it's not always the government doing it. The article talks about self-regulation, too, which is a whole other can of worms.
Oh, right, like industries policing themselves. So like movie ratings, that sort of thing.
Exactly. They set their own rules, trying to avoid any big controversies. But it's tricky. When is it self-regulation and when is it just being too scared to say anything?
Yeah, that's a good point. The article even mentioned this academic publisher. They pulled a book about censorship because they were worried about lawsuits.
I know, right? Talk about ironic. It just shows how deep this all goes. Even talking about censorship can be a problem.
This whole deep dive has been eye-opening. Seriously, we started with this one Wikipedia article, and now it feels like censorship's this massive thing, touching everything. Laws, history, what people believe.
And that's what makes it so interesting, you know? It's not just about what gets censored, but WHY. What does that tell us about ourselves? And the thing is, those reasons, they change all the time.
Yeah, it never really ends, does it? Every generation has its own battles over this stuff.
Exactly. And now, with the internet, it's a whole new world. New rules, new arguments. But at the end of the day, it's still about finding that line free speech, but also keeping people safe. Not easy.
This has really got me thinking, I gotta say. It's not just some abstract thing, censorship. It's real. It affects us all.
100%.
Hmm.
And we all play a part in it, whether we realize it or not. So next time you see something's been censored, think about it for a second. WHY. Who decided that? What does it mean for everyone else?
That's a good point to end on, I think. Being aware is half the battle, right?
Absolutely. Be curious, ask questions, and don't be afraid to talk about it. That's what matters.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, that was quite the deep dive. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Until next time, keep exploring, keep thinking, and we'll see you on the flip side.